Sorry, Arnold. Thanks. I'll just cut in again here. So these are the Army Painter speed paints. Yeah, thanks, Alexandra. I just turned it on. Sorry, guys. So these are the Army Painter speed paints. They are fairly thin, and they have this clever way of working where you get the base, you get the highlight, and you get the shade in one go. And if that sounds similar, it's because quite a few miniature painting companies have actually been doing this over the last couple of years. First out of the gate were Games Workshop with their contrast range, which I showed you guys earlier today, and which I use a lot. A lot of the time I don't use it as intended, but I enjoy it quite a bit. The most recent one for this is actually Army Painter with their speed paints, and they were kind enough to ship me a set, and I am going to show you how I most commonly use these. For this bit of work, I'm going to be using the Orc Gunner here. He's from the same set as the boys that I was painting earlier today. For some of these techniques, they're going to be similar. So for example, the metals are still going to be blacks with metal pigment dry brushed on top. For some of the techniques, I'm going to be doing slightly different things because Army Painter have this fun thing that happens with them where if I have put one layer on and then add more speed paint, they actually dissolve the lower layer, and this is true for about half an hour or so at least. There have been other people testing these for quite a bit, and it seems that after 6 to 8 hours that effect has definitely worn off. But this means that where with contrast I need to work really fast if I want to do this acrylic on top of my contrast paint, I need to work super fast. With the speed paints I can actually spend a fair bit more time and still reactivate the lower layers. So I'm going to try and show you guys that. Now the Orcs Skin here is kind of a fun one because the bottle itself is way brighter than the corresponding Orc Flesh from Citadel, but actually the colors aren't that dissimilar. So I guess, you know, different pigments, different binders, but this means that these orcs are actually going to look fine together as a unit, even though I'm using ranges from two different companies, which I'm happy about, of course. So just putting in some green here. For orcs, I generally tend to start with the skin because they're going to have a lot of it, and it's really good for well, lining up your miniature, figuring out what else is going to work. Until you've got your greens down, you don't really know what the rest of the miniature is going to look like. So, got the arms mostly done here. Moving on to the face. These new orc boys, by the way, have some really awesome facial expressions. This guy looks like he's hugely enjoying just blasting away with his massive rifle here, whereas some of them look completely manic, charging towards their foes. So there's really a lot of storytelling built into the miniatures from the get-go. By the way, I hope the sound is coming through all right now. It does look as if it is on my screen, but please let me know if it's not. So, skin tone's almost done here, and whereas with the contrast paints, I can be quite sloppy with my application because I'm going to be covering it up anyways, I need to be more careful with the speed paints, simply because they're going to reactivate. So if I overpaint somewhere, I need to get rid of it, or I need to know that it's going to reactivate for at least the first 6 hours or so. Right, so that's the skin tones down. As with the contrasts, I could totally leave this here. I've got the shade, I've got the base, I've got the highlights. This is decent tabletop standard. This is fine. But, of course, I'm going to see if I can't do something a bit more fun. So I'm going to bring in the same duck egg green, 71009 duck egg. Perfect. Thanks, Arnold. That I used this morning. And I am going to use it to once again modulate the skin tone. So going on top of what I've already done, and you can see the speed paint is actually already reactivating as I'm blending in. And to be honest, for this technique, the speed paints work at least as well as the contrasts. They're really, I mean, they're doing exactly what I would like them to do, which is cool. Because I kind of want them to reactivate. So I was kind of excited when I heard that they had this property, whereas lots of other people were annoyed because what are we going to do? The paint's reactivating. For my technique here, that's exactly what I want to happen. All right, so I'm going to bring in some yellow. Again, this is exactly as before, 71002 medium yellow. And exactly as with my previous orc, I'm just using that to sort of add a bit of interest to the larger pieces. So on top of his shoulder here, bringing in some yellow. The lower arm here as well, just a bit. Top of the thumb there. Gonna bring in a bit to the lower facial areas here as well. There we go. Yeah. And already I'm getting some skin tones here that I think are gonna look really, really cool once the miniature is done. All right. So that's the greens done. I have a fair bit of modulation built in from the start. And this is, again, I mean, this is one layer. 3 different paints, same layer, wet on wet blending. Okay, so next up, I kind of want to cover his vest. So, tried the green. Holy white, not much for an orc. We've got a pretty cool gray color, and we've got one called Sand Golem. Now the Sand Golem, I think I'm going to use for his vest, and then I'm going to go with the Gravelord Grey for the trousers. There we go. For these orcs, I am keeping pretty much everything in browns and grays to really offset the skin and make it the defining feature of them. I could, of course, bring in blues or reds or something, and it's frequently done if you're painting a specific clan. But for these guys, I just really want them to be super orky. So I'm keeping pretty much all other colors out of the equation. The Sand Golem is not the color I originally thought when I read it, the name of it, because I was assuming that it would be closer to some of the yellowish, light, sandy tones of the contrast range. And it turns out it's closer to Nastreg yellow, to be honest. But it's a really, really nice color. If we compare here to the orc that I did earlier with the Nastreg yellow, Sand Golem is probably a little bit darker, but they're close enough that they'll easily work together. And really nice in my case is that I like a bit of variation for these guys, so it just adds more options to my palette, which is always a good thing. So for the Sand Golem, I'm going to use 71132 aged white. I've used this 4 out of 4 tutorials today. So we go here. Again, I'm just using it to lighten up the already existing highlights on the top of the vest here. Trying to enhance what already exists, working with the contrast, or rather in this case, the speed paint, but working with the existing layers and just enhancing the effects. Of course, just as with contrast, you can easily use these as they are out of the bottle, but by doing it this way, I get more options, I get more variation out of them, which is fantastic in my book. So moving on to the trousers, using the Gravelord Grey, which is quite dark. It is close to being as dark as Games Workshop's Black Templar. It does, however, have a really nice flow to it. So I'm getting super nice shades here, actually. I'm continually impressed by the flow of these paints, honestly. Painting in the trousers here. There we go. And for these, well, I kind of want to keep them in the gray range. So I'm going to grab a medium gray airbrush paint. I'm going to use the dark ghost gray in this case. Add a drop to my palette. And just as with the other layers, throwing a bit of the acrylic into the mix, just to further modulate, further enhance what already exists. There we go. Lightening up what already exists, using the contrasts to show me where my next layer is going. So this is really making for a super easy, convincing effect on this orc right here. Alright, so what else we got? Grim Black. Now this one is the one that the guys at Army Painter have been raving about to me. So I'm just going to try it on the gun here. And I mean, I've been using Black Templar for a year or so. I've been really happy with it. And I don't think I'm going to stop using Black Templar because it really works well for my approach with the fast metals here. But the flow, again, of this Grim Black is really, really good. That's what really impresses me here. It's just flowing really nicely, and it's to be honest, it's probably giving me a better gradient than Black Templar. But that also means that I'm getting more gray areas and less black areas. And in many of the cases where I use Black Templar, the exact reason that I use it is that I want most of my areas to be black in that case. It's not a huge difference between them, but they're definitely different paints with slightly different applications, so something to consider. As always, this depends on your personal style and such, but in my case, I think I still prefer Black Templar of the two. But as I mentioned, flow is again just phenomenal here. I mean, I'm gonna grab some pictures of these tonight so you guys can see clearly what I've been working with here. But the gradients that I'm getting here are close to what I would expect from airbrush work. That's where we're at. So I'm kind of interested in seeing the rest of the Speedpaint range, because if we have any super bright blues or super bright greens or yellows, they probably work really well for energy effects. That's my assumption. So I'm looking forward to testing that eventually. So I have now painted most of the weapon, and so far I'm not really seeing any bleeding here. I'm not seeing any overlapping of the colors at all. It can, of course, happen later, and now that I've got the black on there, the risk is larger because it's a very heavily pigmented color. But I'm going to move on to the pallid bone. I'm going to do some leather straps. And this is where we might actually have the bleeding, because now I'm coming in with a really light color and right up against the green. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. And I mean, I'm being careful, but I'm not being crazy careful, so I am getting the various layers mixed together. So we'll see what happens. I think the shoulder pad's going to be in the bone color as well. There we go. And I may actually just come in and paint the tops here and the helmet, paint those in black, see what happens. Yeah. Let's go for sand golem on some of these straps as well, just to vary it a bit more. The basic set here is pretty decent in color range. I mean, I probably would have liked to have seen a turquoise or something like that. And I feel like I'm missing a pure red as well. But for the colors that are here, they're really, really strong colors. They're really, really nice. So I'm going to try the dark wood, it's called here. Dark wood speed paint. And just going to paint in the boots using that one. And it's called dark wood, but to be honest, it works really nicely for the leather bits as well. So that's where I'm using it mostly. Just rechecking the wristbands here. Still no real noticeable bleeding. Oh yeah, there's a tiny bit on the back of the hand actually, where it's bled through. So, I mean, I am getting it, but I think as long as you're being sensible about these and not smashing them on there, it's fine. This of course means that if you want to be really fast, contrast are going to be better for you because they dry faster and they dry more solid, which is kind of interesting because my main gripe with with Games Workshop airbrush paint is that it doesn't dry fast enough. But with the contrast, they've hit upon a formula that really dries fast. So it's kind of weird. Okay, so boots done. I think I'm gonna go back and use some acrylics now. See if I can still reactivate these, just for fun. And if I go back to the shoulder pad, yep, still reactivating nicely. So, I mean, I still have full capability of actually reactivating these and reworking them, which is cool. I mean, it's what this technique is about, so they're doing really, really well for this, actually. Gonna grab a bit more of the Grim Black. Easily one of the better colors of this range. Gonna paint more of the metal bits here. Just get them all done. For this orc, I'm not going to be able to do the dry brush metal technique right now, because if I do, I'll reactivate the blacks and it's all going to flow together. So that is one of the kind of annoying side effects of the speed paints when compared to contrast. The contrast are simply easier to immediately overpaint. I can't do that with these guys, but as long as I know about it, I'll just do other stuff. It's fine. Even so, it's helpful to know. Right. Do the steel caps on the boots. we go. And yeah, let's do the clips in black as well. Let's go. And for these, I think I'm just going to switch directly to one of the light browns afterwards and paint it right next to the black and see if I can actually try and provoke the bleeding between colors. I mean, that's going to be pretty much the worst case because I've got the black and I'll bring in the bone color, I guess, the pallid bone. If those don't bleed, I'll be surprised, but let's see. I'm just painting in the rest of the clips on his back here. There we go. This is also a nice contrast point between the black and the gray. They actually work really nicely together, but the Gravelord Gray has a tiny bit of blue to it, which I was able to enhance with my acrylic, the 71-120. And that means that there's no doubt now that these are different areas, these are different textures. True, Alexandra. That I didn't actually consider that. Yes, the one that allows you to do the slow blends and the slow drying is called Speedpaint. That is kind of amusing. So, just going back to the, what was it called again? The dark wood, and painting in some of his leather straps here. Here we go. And after that, I'll do the straps on the ammo on his back here. And I mean, already I've been going on this for what, 20 minutes or so, and I've pretty much got a fully painted orc at this point. Getting really, really close. So speed paint, yep, definitely. But we do need to realize that there are limitations to the technique, and as long as you know the limitations, you can just work within them. In my book, these are still very, very much worth my time. So just grab this one as well. See if I can get some bleeding there. Nope. Okay, going back to the light brown. Painting in his tusks. There we are. And the straps on the mags here on the back. Now, as I mentioned, the black is still wet here, so if I don't get bleeding, I'll almost be disappointed. But I am being quite careful with this, so any bleeding should be purely from reactivation and not me hitting a different area. Okay. Last bit of black down here on his steel cap on the boot. There we go. And one final bit up on the shoulder. This is the other way around. This is black on top of the light brown. So, grim black on top of pallid bone, whereas the other one was pallid bone on top of grim black. Let's see what happens here. And no real bleeding. I mean, this is going on nicely. It's staying where it's supposed to. I mean, yeah, it's working like it should, honestly. Just gonna go back and add a bit to the patch on the back here because that's actually the last bit. And I've got a painted orc. So guys, this is a 20-minute speed paint orc. And as the gun dries down here, it is, I mean, that is beautiful. Look at that gradient. That's amazing. In contrast, we've got this guy. I would be hard pressed to tell you which one of these was contrast and which one of these was speed paint. if I didn't know. Yeah. These are looking really, really nice together. Both types of paints seem to work super nicely for the techniques I'm using here. If you keep in mind the limitations of each, you can do well with either, or you can use them both together, which is most likely what I'll be doing here. Thank you so much for following along, guys. That is the end of my live streaming from today. I've had a really good time at the Torshammer. We've had a ton of people come by. I'm actually, you know what, I'm just gonna show you a bit from the hall. Just a second. Just gonna free up my camera here and show you what the hall looks like. So, there you have it. That's the hall we're in today. Lots of gaming going on. We've had lots of people coming by. We've had people at the paint stations almost through the entire day. Kids, grown-ups, beginners, people who've been in the hobby for years. It's been a really good experience. Thanks so much, guys, for joining. I'll see you soon. Take care.